Hi everybody, and welcome back to Sew Along with Jan and part 4 of the September Kimberbell Mini Quilt. So we're going to put our little mini quilt together tonight, and this is an evening that I'm doing this. So we're going to put our little mini quilt together, and we're going to put the little sleeve on the back and our binding. So I just decided with all of these little mini quilts that I was going to do a assembly video for everyone so that you could actually see the actual quilt being put together instead of doing just one for all of them. So that way hopefully you'll learn a lot about binding and putting your backs on and doing stitch in the ditch. And so I just thought it'd be good to do that for every single quilt because everyone's put together slightly differently. So let's first talk about what we all need to put our mini quilt together. Of course, we need all of our blocks. So here's all of my little blocks. I've got all the little small ones. These are like 2.5 inches. And here's all the little bit larger ones here. So we're going to use those to put it together. And then we also need some binding. So here's my binding, and I've already made my binding. My binding is 2.25 inches wide instead of 2.5. So if you like 2.5 better, go ahead and use 2.5. But I usually use 2.25 because then my binding is a little more snug on my mini quilt. So I've got my binding all prepared. You know, I sewed it together diagonally and then folded it in half. So I think most of you probably have seen me do binding enough that you know how to do that part. Okay, so there's the binding. We also need the sleeve. So my sleeve was originally cut 6 inches by 12 inches. And so what I did then is on one side up here, I measured in 1/2 inch from the edge, and then I trimmed it with a rotary cutter and my ruler. I put it on that 1/2 inch mark, and I went down to the corner. So this end here is 12 inches wide, and this end here is 11. So it's slightly tapered. And then I pressed in 1/2 inch on each side. And then I will hem this. So I wanted to show you what it looked like. So then I will hem this. So I put 1/2 inch and 1/2 inch on each side to hem, and then we're going to fold this in half like this to put it on the back of the little quilt, and that'll be our little sleeve to hang it with on my stand. Okay, or if you have one of the little bars, you can use the little sleeve as well. So there's the sleeve. We need that, and then we need our backing, and the backing is 14 inches by 14 inches. And what I've learned to do is to put shape flex on my backing, on the wrong side of the backing, because then it gives me it doesn't wrinkle so when you do the stitching in the ditch. So I found that if I don't put the shape flex on the back, it gets kind of wrinkly looking, and I like it to look smooth on the back. So this is my backing with my shape flex on the back. And then for our little sleeve, when we go to press this in half, and I'll show this to you again later. I'll do this hemming off camera on here. And then this little piece, we need a piece of heat and bond ultra. And this will then be what will hold it to the quilt. So when we fold it in half like this, the skinnier part is going to be against the quilt, and we're going to iron this on, this heat and bond. I've got it cut to about 3/4 of an inch, and it's about 11 inches long, so I'll trim it off a little bit. I found that when I put it on, it's better to put it on and then cut it off before you get to the hems, because it doesn't want to adhere very well through that extra bulk. So I'm just going to cut it off to about here when I put it on, and I'll show it to you in a little bit when I go to put the back together. So that you'll need that little piece of ultra, or heat and bond ultra as well. Okay. So to sew this together, I'm going to look at the instructions for putting this together. Start on page 19 of the instructions, and it's 19 and 20. Yeah, 19 and 20. So the first thing we got to do is sew together all of our little blocks that we made. So I thought what I do, I'm going to kind of go by the instructions, but I kind of look at the pictures and I do it that way. So I thought to make my ironing a little more efficient, I'm going to sew all of these small blocks together first. So it looks like to me that, you know, and we just quilted these little blocks here. I have to make sure I get them right side up though. Oh yeah, because the acorn's right here. The ones that had the little acorn design on them. So those are the two little filler blocks. And I think there's one in each of these. So the first set is, there's a little gourd and the brown piece. So I want to make sure I put this, I think I want it this way. And then the little leaf. So we're going to sew these three together here. And then these three together this way. So we're going to put this one like this. And then we're going to put the orange one in the middle. And I want the acorn upright. And then we're going to put the little mushroom block on this side. So these three we're going to sew together. So we'll sew these little ones together first. And then we will put the larger blocks on each side. So I have some Pima cotton thread in my needle and my bobbin. It's kind of a cream color, so I thought that would be a good color to use because it's kind of neutral to these. So let's do these three first. So we're going to start with the gourd and my little filler block, the little brown filler block here. So I'm just going to put them right sides together. We're going to be using a 1/4 inch seam. Grab a pin here. I'm just going to put a pin in the middle of it here. So we'll sew these two little rows together. And I'm going to go over here. Let me show you. I'm going to go ahead and use my piecing stitch. I like to use the piecing stitch. I'm going to go to the Q tab, and I'm going to use Q02, which then moves my needle to the right. And then I can run my fabric right along the edge of my J foot because it tells me to use my J foot right here. So I'm going to be using the piecing stitch on the machine. My foot seems to be having a little spasm over here. I don't know what's going on. I think I have a little problem with my foot controller. My foot controller is very old. I've had this foot controller for probably over 10 years, and I think maybe my foot controller is going. All right, so I am going to go ahead and get these lined up, and we're going to use our 1/4 inch seam then with our piecing stitch, and we're going to sew these together. So let me get this lined up. Get my everything lined up here. Hopefully you can see. I'm going to put this down just a little lower to get it away from my elbow. I always have to get the camera just in the right spot so that I can sew and have a camera at the same time here. All right, so we're going to go ahead and do our 1/4 inch seam. I'm running that right along my edge of my J foot here because I have it set on that stitch. Okay. And then the next one is going to be the little leaf. So where did my leaf go? Here's my leaf. So here's my leaf. Put that one, here's the gourd, here's the little acorn block, and here's my leaf. So we'll put this one on. So this one had a lot of little blocks to sew together. But it'll go together pretty quickly. These usually go together pretty quickly because they don't have that many pieces. And it's only like 12 inches, 12 by 12, so it's not too big. But they go together. This one just had more blocks to it. I always enjoy this part. I enjoy getting to see what it looks like when it's all done. And I had some different fabrics in mine, so it'll be interesting to see what mine will look like because I've got some different fabrics in it. All right, so then we got that one. So here's those, and I'll press those in a moment. So let's do this other little set first. And then, so this one's going to be the little leaf on the brown one, and then my little orange polka dot. So those two are going to go together first. So put those together. I like the little acorn embroidery, or the little acorn quilting design. That was really cute. So get these. And when I go to press these, I'm going to press the seams open because otherwise they're a little on the bulky side. So I like to press these open. All right, so we're going to sew this one together. Tie it off a little bit, and then we'll do the little mushroom, this little mushroom block. That's really cute too. These had such cute blocks. I've really enjoyed doing these. I hope you guys are enjoying these too. I've really enjoyed these a lot. They're such cute little blocks, and now I have something to put in my little frame every month. It's so nice to have something to decorate I've got several things in my living room. I've been trying to use I've got all these beautiful pillows too, so I've been putting them out too. I was hoping they might do another set of the little bench buddy pillows. I just love those little pillows. I was hoping they'd do another set of those, that we could do those, because I enjoyed those a lot too. Okay, so there's my little second little row there, and I'm going to go press these open, and then we're going to start putting the bigger blocks on. So these were like the little, kind of like the center lines. So this one's going to go this way, and this one's going to go like up and down like this. So I'm going to go press these open, and so press your seams open to make them nice and flat. Since they're kind of bulky, I like to press them open like this. And then we're going to put the first row is going to be the, I don't know if you can see it over here, the house and the bigger mushroom. And then the bottom row is going to have the acorns and the leaf on it. So I will be back in a moment. I'm going to press these, and then I'll be back, and we'll do a little more stitching here. Okay, so I've got these all pressed open like this. So the next block is going to be, for this one, we're going to put the mushroom, the larger mushroom on this side, like this, and then we'll put the house on the other side. So let's go ahead and put our mushroom on first. Line it all up, and then I like to put a pin in those seams that I opened up so that they don't flip over on me. So I'm going to go ahead and put a pin on each side of that. Keeps me from having to, it keeps it flatter if I can pin those down, because they like to flip over on you sometimes. So I'll put that on. Oops, second here. There we go. And then we'll stitch this one, and then we're going to stitch the house on. And I got to go back to my Q02. I was using the center needle position for a minute while I was off camera. So I'm on Q02 for my 1/4 inch seam, and we're just going to sew this 1/4 inch seam. Put your fabric right along the edge of your J-foot. It's a nice way to, if you don't want to put if you want to use a 1/4 inch piecing foot, that's absolutely fine. I so often use this one that I don't have to change the foot. And it's very accurate, because you can adjust it slightly, and I do most of my piecing this way. All right, so then we're going to put the house on. I've got to find my house. Here it is. So here's my house. So we're going to put the house on the other side, and then we'll do the pressing. We'll do the other piece too, and then we'll do all the pressing together. So here's that one. That looks so cute. We'll press that open, and then we're going to put the house on the other side here. Yeah, so this one goes over here. So we'll get this all lined up, and I'm going to pin those little seams open so that they don't flip over on me. That. And then we will do that one, and then the next one we have to do like the acorns on the bottom of this one, and then put the thankful heart. So we'll do some more sewing, and then I'll go do a bunch of pressing at the same time. Okay, so I'm not quite lined up, I don't think. All right, so get this lined up. We'll do our 1/4 inch seam there. There we go. I really thought that house block was really cute. It has such pretty colors in it. Lots of leaves and lots of stitching. That one had a lot of stitching on it. It took quite a while. And then, let's see what this looks like. I'm going to put my pins over here because I'll need them again. All right, so there's that. And I'm going to do the same thing with this one. I'm going to open my seams. So that's the top row. So I'll put that back here for a minute, and then let's do the bottom row. So like this one, then we're going to sew onto our acorns. So here's the acorns. So I'm going to put this one on the acorn block like this. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to pin those little seams open so that I won't flip them over to keep the bulk down. And oops, there we go. Oops. All right, so we got that, and then we'll put the leaf on last. Gonna move my book, get it out of the way here. All right, again, we're gonna do our 1/4 inch seam. Get all lined up, and then we'll do our leaf. This is gonna be really cute. My colors are a little different though than the book. A couple of them I was just looking at the book and looking at and I thought, oh, that looks really, really good. Well, I really should have picked an orange instead of a red, but that's okay. There's red leaves in the fall too, isn't there? All right, so we'll pull these off. So that goes like that. We're gonna, oh, I'm gonna have to press this one first before we put the other one on. So I'm gonna stop the camera for a minute and go press these. And then I will be back, and then we'll put the leaf on the other side of this one because I need to press this open first. So I'll be right back. Okay, so here's the top row, and I had to press this open so I could put the other block on, the thankful block. Now be aware that you do have some vinyl up here, so be careful with the iron so you don't melt your vinyl on your little windows there. So you just have to be careful. And then this one's going to go like this. So we'll get this one on next, and then we can sew the 2 halves together. It doesn't take too long to put these together. All right, we'll get these put together. I'm going to turn the page because I'm kind of at the bottom of page 19 right now, and then I'm going to turn the page, and it shows the putting them together here. So let me get this one out of my way, and we'll stitch this one together. And then we'll have to press one more time before we put the 2 halves together. Always got to get your seams nice and flat before you put things together. So, all right, so this one's going to be it. We're still using our Q02 piecing stitch. Press these, or to stitch these together. All right. And then I'll press this one last one, and then we will put the 2 halves together. So I got this one. So here's my thankful with my red leaf instead of my orange one, but you know, I kind of like it. I think it's going to look just fine. So then this whole thing will go together like this. All right, so I'll be right back after I press this one, and then we'll put our 2 halves together. Okay, so I've got my other half here. I got all my seams nice and flat. I'm going to go ahead, and this one goes on the top. So we need to get our seam matched up here in the middle. So I'm going to match that up first. I think that's the only one we have to match up, is just the one. So I like to make sure they are nice and even there. I'm going to pin these little seams down so they won't flip open, and then we'll go to this side. Do the same thing here. Looks like I'll need some more pins. Pin this one, and then let's put a pin maybe in the middle of this one over here. And I think there might be a seam. Yeah, there are a couple seams in here we'll need to pin open. Make sure we don't flip those little things over. That. I really enjoy fall a lot. When I worked at a music store in the past, and fall was very, very, very busy there with all the rentals and of the band instruments and all that. And so now I really enjoy fall because it's cooler, and I just enjoy, I never enjoyed fall until I worked at a sewing store, because now it gets busier in our fall, and the fall at the music store was very, 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 very busy. So I was always glad when fall was over there. But all right, so we're going to get this one stitched together, still using that Q02 piecing stitch. Okay, make sure everything's lined up here. There we go. Oh my gosh, this is going to be so cute. Every one of these is my favorite. It's funny because I just really enjoy all of them, and they've been so much fun to make. And they're all very different. I haven't really looked at the next one. I think the October one is going to be Halloween, I believe. Haven't really looked at it. We'll look at it before I end the video tonight. All right, so let's get these unpinned, and then I'll go press this. Look, oh my gosh, I even got it pretty straight in the middle. That's always my goal, is to get it straight in the middle. All right, look at there. Isn't that going to be cute? So I'm going to go press that last seam open, and then we're going to be ready to put the backing on and be ready for the stitching in the ditch. Okay, so here's my little top. Isn't that cute? I really, I like the gray. I wasn't sure if I'd like it, but I like it. I think it's actually supposed to be kind of a green, but I didn't have anything that, and I thought it looked gray. So I think it looks just fine with the red leaf and the gray. So I like that. Now be careful again when you're pressing. Remember, you've got this vinyl up here, and you don't want to melt your vinyl. So there's my little top. So now we're ready to put the backing on. And I'm going to put the wrong side up, and I'll do this over on my cutting table, but I'll show you kind of what I'm going to do. You put the wrong side up, so this is the shape flex side, and the pretty side's on the back. And I'm going to lay my little quilt here, kind of center it as best you can, and we'll trim it off. But I want to center it the best I can, and then I'm going to pin baste. I'm kind of a pin baster. So I've got my little safety pins here, and I'm just going to put a pin in each of these blocks to hold things together. So I normally don't do this on my sewing machine, but I was just going to do a couple of blocks, kind of start in the center and work your way out, and then put a pin in so that it stays together while you're working on it. So I'm just going to go ahead and pin this, and I'm going to take it over to my table now and do that. And I'm going to pin all the way around all the blocks to make sure that it stays together, and then we'll be doing the stitching in the ditch for the quilting part, and then we'll start getting ready to put our binding on. Okay, so I pin basted my little quilt, and I try to keep the pins kind of away from where I'm going to be doing the stitching in the ditch, so I don't have so much, in my way. I don't like to have to move them if I can help it. So I have also switched over to my Mettler Transfill monofilament thread that I'm going to use for the stitching in the ditch. I find that works the best for that. It just doesn't show. There's so many different colors in here, so I like to use the monofilament. And then I also have it in my bobbin. So just be careful when you wind your bobbin with monofilament that you wind it slowly. You turn your bobbin winder speed down, and then also don't put more than about 1/4 of a bobbin at a time. So I have that ready, and so I'm going to go ahead and switch my, whoops, here, I got a little knot. Just a minute here. Okay, I'm going to switch this back to a straight stitch in the with the center needle position, so it's going to be Q01. So see, my needle moved over. I'm also going to make the stitch length from 2.5 to 3. Just make it a little longer when I'm working with the stitching the ditch. We're going through quite a few layers. Okay. So I'm just going to go ahead. Let's start in the middle here. We'll just start in the middle here and do this middle seam. I'm going to put that down, drop my needle, and I'm just going to tie it off with my monofilament and my needle here and my bobbin. And I'm just going to, I'm using my J-foot, and I usually stitch in the ditch with a J-foot because there's a little notch in here that I'm running right down the seam, and that seems to work the best for me. And if it works better for you to use a stitch in the ditch foot, they also make stitch in the ditch feet. But this works better for me to use this J-foot because I can guide from that little notch in my foot, coming down to the next side, okay? And if you leave your pins a little further away, so then you don't have to move them when you're doing this. So I like to try to not have to move those pins too much. Okay, so we're going all the way down the bottom here, and I'm just going to tie off when I get close to the bottom, like that. Okay, and I'll cut off, and then we'll do the other side. So I think I'm just going to go down this other side here. Oops, here. Going to get the pins out of the way, okay. And we're going to do this side, and then I'll go in and I'm going to do all these little ones too. All right, so let's see here. I often do the little ones last, so we'll do this. and tie off, and then we're going to go across the middle here. I'm still using that 3.0 for the length, just to give it a little bit more length to go through the bulk. Trying to stay right in that ditch, in that seam there. A lot of people ask me what stitch in the ditch means, and it just means to be basically sewing down that seam line so that you hide the thread you're using. And that's why I use monofilament, because it's very, you know, invisible then. You don't really notice it, especially if you have lots of colors. Okay, so I'm going to tie off. Okay, so now let's do these little ones. So we're going to start, let's do this one up here. I'm just going to start here. I'm just going to start right where this block and this block meet, and drop my needle in there, tie off, and then we'll just go down to here. And actually this one needs to be done too, so we'll probably just go ahead and do these little ones first. Let me do the little ones. We'll just tie off right here at the other end. There we go. The little 2.5 inch blocks. And then we'll do this one, and then I'll go up here too, along that mushroom block. Okay, let's see here. Get that lined up. I'm using that little notch to help me. Tie off, and then we'll go here, and then I'm going to go down this one too. So basically, wherever your seams are, you just want to do a little stitching, because that way it will hold everything nicely together. And the other thing I really like, so let me turn it over real quick. I really like that when I put the shape flex, see, it keeps everything nice and flat on the back, so it doesn't look ripply in here. So that looks really good. All right, so let's go ahead and get this one now. I'm going to start in the middle, I think, on this one. Whoops, I got a long thread. Where did that come from? Oh, it's way over here. Just had a long thread. We'll get that out of the way. Okay. So we're gonna stitch up right here where the little mushroom is. Start down there and tie off, and then we're going to stitch up on the other side of these little blocks here. Just try to keep it straight. And whatever works for you. Like I said, I've always used just my regular J-foot, because I find that I can focus on that notch, and if that doesn't work for you, try using a stitch in the ditch foot. Okay, and then let's see, so we got these two, got a little tail here. Let's see if we can get rid of that tail. Okay, and then we need to get these little guys done, and then we'll have this seam right here to do yet. So let's do these little short ones here. There's a little bit more stitching on this one because there were more blocks. We'll do the tie off here. And go up between these two. And then we'll tie off at the top here. That looks good. Cut, and then I'm going to go do the next one. Let me get this little tail out of my way. Go do this one. I kind of try to cut these monofilament tails as I go because they are so hard to see. So I think there'll be one that looks pretty good. We'll drop the needle there and go up here, and then we're going to sew along this little line too. And then I think we got everything. And there's a lot of little blocks in this one, so compared to the last couple we've done. Tie this one up. And cut, and then we'll turn it over and we'll do this other side. Is there a tail sticking up here too? Yeah. Get that trimmed. And then we'll go do this one over this way. All right. Get that all lined up. Tie it off, and then we're going to go up this little seam here. Trying to stay as straight as I can. Sometimes with these darker colors I have a little more trouble. That dark brown is very dark. Okay. All right, let's see how we did here. I think we got everything. So we were up through here, down through here, and then we did all these little ones. Let's take a look at the back. So we should look like the front. So here's our little squares here, and here's our little squares here, and here's the block here, and then the two bigger blocks. So I think we got it. That looks good. So now the last thing that I like to do, let's see if I have a string here. I like to try to get these as I go because otherwise I forget about them. They're so hard to see. Okay. All right, so then what I like to do is I like to leave the needle in the center, and I'm just going to use the other notch. There's another notch on this foot that's a little bit further to the right, and that's about 1/8 of an inch from the center needle position. So I'm just going to go ahead and stitch all the way around the outside edge of this little mini quilt just to hold everything down along the edge as well. So I'm just basically going to do kind of a top stitch, and we're just going to stitch. And I've just got that other notch, which is way over here towards the right-hand side of the zigzag opening. I'm going to run that right along the edge of the quilt, and that will be about 1/8 of an inch. And we're just going to stitch around with the monofilament, and that way it holds everything together. So when we go to do our binding, things aren't going to be flopping around for us. All right, one more stitch, I think. Here we go. Turn the corner here. Oops, I got a little overzealous. Let me raise my needle and push over a little bit here. Got a little overzealous there. There we go. Do this side. But this really helps to stitch along the edge, because then you know you're not going to be missing like a layer when you go to put your binding on. Because I've done that before, that I haven't stitched it together, and then I missed one side got stitched down and the other one got flipped over. So that happens sometimes. All right, do the third side. It really helps though. And then we're gonna, whoops, second here, I got a real dark thread there. There we go. And then up the last side. And then we can take all the pins out, and we're going to trim the outside edges down to the edge of the quilt. So then we'll be ready for the binding. Binding is fun. And I've done a binding video for each one of these because I just thought it would help people to see the binding done on that actual little quilt. So it's always nice to see the whole project from start to finish. All right, so there is our little mini quilt all stitched in the ditch, and I'm ready to take the pins out, and then I'm going to go take my rotary cutter and my ruler and just go right along the edge of my block here to trim off the little bit of that backing that needs to be trimmed off. There's about 1 inch all the way around. Okay, and then we'll be ready for the binding. Okay, so we're ready for a little binding here. Got it all trimmed on the edges. I just trimmed the backing off up to the blocks. Let's see what the back looks like here. So the next thing we need to do is put our little sleeve on. And so what I did is I went ahead and pressed it in half, and then one side is narrower than the other. And this is going to be the side, this narrower side is going to be the side that goes against the quilt. And I marked the center of it, and I also ironed on my little piece of Heat and Bond Ultra here on the bottom. And the paper's still on there, so I'm not going to press it down to the back of the quilt until I've got it on. So we need to put this on first before we start our binding. So I'm going to find the top of my quilt, and I'm going to flip it over here. I know where the center is because there was a seam right down the center. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to flip this so that my little piece of Heat and Bond and my narrower side, you can see this is the narrower side, is going to go against the back of the little quilt. So I'm just going to line up the centers here. I've marked this. It's always the hardest part, is to get this all lined up. There we go. And I'm just going to pin this on, and so the little sleeve is going to go into the seam with the binding. So I'm just going to go ahead and pin this down, put a couple pins in here so it won't move around while we try to get our binding on. Now I learned to do binding by a little document called Bind Aid, and I do have a copy of it in the description below this video. And I learned to do binding. A lot of people struggle with binding, so that's why I figured it doesn't hurt to show you binding on each one of these, because a lot of people, you know, have struggled with binding, and I did too. So I had a friend that gave me this lovely little document called Bind Aid, and I'll be happy to share it with you so that you can learn to do binding the way I did. So I've got my little sleeve here. I am going to put a couple of pins down here just to keep it from flipping over on me. So I think I'll just put a pin on each corner here just to keep it from flipping up on me so I don't get it stuck in my binding here. Like that. There we go. All right, so I like to start on the bottom and kind of towards the middle with my binding. So I'm going to flip it over. You know, this is the top because that's where we put our sleeve. And then I'm going to flip it back over here. And I am going to go ahead and put my brown thread. I've got some brown thread that matches my my binding really nicely, so I thought I'd do that, and then we can stitch it down with the brown too. So I'm going to take my monofilament out and put my brown thread. I might have to get some more thread wound on my bobbin, but we can at least get it sewed on, I think. That, and get my, and this is just Pima cotton thread again, but it's a nice brown that matches my binding pretty well. And we will be ready for binding. Okay, so my binding again is 2.5 inch, or excuse me, 2.25 inch binding. I need to find my little hem gauge here. Give me a second, and my pen, so it's ready to go. And I'm going to take my binding that is 2.25 inches, and I'm going to lay this in my lap, and I'm going to put the raw edges together, but I need to leave a little tail on the end here. We're just going to leave a little tail, probably about 8 inches or so. And then I'm going to go up towards the end, up towards the corner here. And I'm going to go back to my Q02, which moved my needle back over to the 1/4 inch piecing position. And I'm going to go ahead and line up my foot, drop my needle, and I'm going to tie off. And then we're just going to sew to the corner and stop about 1/4 inch from the edge. And if you need to mark that, go ahead and just put a little pin in there. I just kind of eyeball it now because I've done a lot of binding. So I'm just going to kind of eyeball it. And then I'm going to tie off and cut there on the corner. So I stopped 1/4 inch from the edge. And now I'm going to turn my little quilt, and I'm going to flip the end up to a 45-degree angle, and that looks pretty good. Okay, get it nice and straight with my corner here, and then I'm going to pull straight down, matching up the raw edges again and the top, and then we're going to head up this other side. Okay, so then we're going to do that. Get it all lined up. Tack it down, and then we'll go up this other side. Okay. I'm using a 2.5 millimeter stitch length. That's usually my normal stitch length. And if you notice that I am putting the binding on the back, I am going to sew this down with the sewing machine instead of hand stitching it. So I am putting this on the back of the quilt. And I'm going to stitch it on the front with the machine. If you want to hand stitch your binding down, you would be putting your binding on the front and turning it to the back to stitch it. So I'm about to the corner again here. I think I need to back up a stitch. It's a little bit close. And then I'm going to go, we're going to go around the corner again. So if you are, again, if you are sewing this down with the sewing machine, which is what I'm going to do, I am applying my binding to the back. And then if I want to hand stitch it down, you would apply it to the front and flip it to the back. Okay, so we're going to do the same thing. I'm going to go up, straight up, 45-degree angle, line up my nice corner here. Looks like I'm a little bit close, but it's not too bad. Get it all lined up, get my raw edges all even again, and I'm going to flip it down, and line up my raw edges to go down this next side. So this is actually the top where our little sleeve is. So just be careful that you've got everything nice and flat so that it sews the sleeve right in the top. Works out real well. So we're just going to sew our sleeve right into the top here. Maybe if I can get everything lined up again. Probably better go get my glasses for the next part when we stitch this down, because this brown is very dark. It's almost black. It's very dark brown. And of course, I always choose to make videos in the evening when it's very dark in here anyway. So I wear my glasses a lot this time of evening when I'm doing dark fabrics. All right, so we're going to stitch across here, 1/4 inch seam. Take this pin out too and get it out of my way. Hopefully everything stays put. There we go. So we're going to stop about 1/4 inch from the edge. And the little bind aid document has all these pictures, so this will be really, it's a really good document if you struggle with binding. Okay, so I'm going to hit the cut, turn around the corner again, flip up at a 45-degree angle, line up my corner, and then come straight down with my raw edges. Line everything up again. And then we'll go down this side. Tie it off. Once I got the hang of this, and the hardest part for me was learning to do the machine binding, because I would do these, and then hand stitch it down when I first started making binding, but I really like machine stitching because I do so many samples that it's so much faster if I can do this on the machine. So I finally got the machine stitching part down, and it's looking way better, and I really like it. So that's what I'm going to show you, is the machine stitching, so you can do this. I even do this on my quilts now because I've gotten better at it, and it looks nice, and it's so much faster, especially if you're doing a big quilt. And I use my quilts, so I want them to be strong. I want the binding to be strong, and I don't want to have to worry about it coming off. Okay, so I'm going to flip this around again. We're to the corner. Second here, I got my end here. And we're going to flip this over, 45-degree angle, get our nice angle in there, and bring this flat, or the raw edges right together. Now we're not going to go around the corner too far, just maybe an inch or two, because we need to have a little space in the middle to flip our end. This is always the hard part for everybody, so we need to do the little flip at the end to get the other ends put together. So I'm just going to go around the corner just a couple of inches like that. So leave us a little opening in the middle. Okay, so we're going to tie off and cut. All right, so now we're ready for that part that everybody says they struggle with. So in the when I got my bind aid document, what it showed me was this picture, and this is how I always have done it, and I get along very well with it. So I'm going to lay the piece that we just ended with. This is the piece where we just ended. I'm going to lay this down underneath the piece where we started. This is the piece where we started. I'm going to lay it down there like that. Okay. Now we're going to measure whatever width your binding is. Now my binding is 2 1/4 inches, so we're going to measure 2 1/4 inches. I've got it set on my little hem gauge here. Okay. And I'm going to take a pin, and I'm going to put a pin in the back part of the binding at the 2 1/4 inches. If you're using 2 1/2 inches binding, you would use 2 1/2 inches. So whatever size your binding is, that's the size you use. So I'm going to put that in like that, and then I'll just make sure that I measured correctly. Lay it back down and just measure. It's always good to measure twice. That looks good before you start cutting. That looks good, 2 1/4. Okay, so then I'm going to take this and I'm going to cut it off at that pin. I think looks like I've got it kind of centered, so it should be pretty good. Sometimes I have to trim a little bit, but this one looks pretty good. So I think we'll just be able to cut this off. Okay, so I'm going to fold it right where my pin is and kind of crease it so I know where that is. And then I'm going to grab my little scissors here. We're just going to trim this off. Like that. Okay. I've got a little piece left, so I'll just lay this over here. All right, so there's our two ends. So now what we need to do is we need to get them positioned so that we can stitch them together. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the left-hand side, which is over here where we started. I'm going to push it down. I'm going to pull it down at a 45-degree angle. So see how there's my 45-degree angle like we've been doing on the corners. This piece, I'm going to open it up. So here's the wrong side, and I'm going to lay it flat on the little quilt. Okay? Then I'm going to take the piece where we started, and I'm going to continue in the same direction. So I've got it set at a 45-degree angle, and I'm going to continue in the same direction, and I'm going to open it up as I do that. And then when I get here, the two folds are going to be perpendicular. You're going to make like an X in the middle with the two folded edges, and then you know it's in the right spot. So I'm going to go ahead and pin this. So I lined up my corners. So I'm going to pin here and here. I'm going to put 3 pins in here. A second here. This is a little step, so I always have a little trouble getting the pins in. Sorry, I keep putting my hand in front of the camera. All my pins are over here. I'm left-handed, so I reach for everything with my left hand. Okay, and then we'll put this one in. So now we need to stitch this together. And if you're uncertain that you have it put together correctly, you can always get the pins in and then let go. And if it looks like it's going to lay flat, which it does, then you're fine. So we're going to go ahead and we need to mark where our corners are. I have my marking pen here. And I'm just going to mark where I'm going to be, my corners are. So one of them is hidden kind of underneath. So I'm going to take my marking pen and just put a mark here and a mark here. And you can draw all the way across. I used to do that, but I just kind of eyeball it now. So I'm not going to draw all the way across. And then I'm going to fold this so that this part lays nice and flat, because you need this part to lay nice and flat so we can sew across here. All right, so I'm going to put my needle into the center needle position again. I just went to Q01 on that same tab, and I'm going to line up my corner with my needle. Drop my needle. And then we're going to head over to this corner right here. So we get it all nice and flat, and then away we go. And like I said, if you want to, you can just go ahead and make the line all the way across if you want, but I usually can eyeball it close enough. All right, let's see how we did here. And then before you cut anything, I always take the pins out and just lay it down to make sure that it looks flat. So see it laid flat like that. So then it's safe to cut. So then we're going to trim all this bulk out of here. I trim up to about 1/4 of an inch, so there's a seam allowance in there. And then we're going to just finger press that open like that. And just finger press it open. And then we're going to lay it flat. And look at there. So then what I do, I think I need to press just a little bit more here. Just a second. So when I lay it down like this, then I like to pin this, because sometimes it's just, I need to, there's a little bit of fullness sometimes, and so I just work in the fullness a little bit with my pins, and that helps. So this one needs to come out this way just a little bit. So we'll just pin this, and then we're going to stitch this together. So that's the little flip at the end. This is really documented well in Bind Aid, and it shows you the pictures, and that's how I learned to do this. I just looked at the pictures and read the directions, And I had never done binding before, and I learned how to do binding right away with that. And so that hopefully will help you. And so I'll put the link to it in the description so you can download it. I've always done binding that way. I've just changed where I put the binding. So now I put the binding on the back, you know, instead of on the front like I used to. Okay, so now I'm going to switch back to Q02 for my 1/4 inch piecing stitch, and then we're going to just finish this little seam. Get everything lined back up again, and then we're just going to go across the bottom. And then we'll be ready to put the binding down. Yay! So almost all the hard stuff is done. And there was no embellishments on this one that you had to put on like last. You know, in the most of them we have a little bit of embellishment to do, but this one didn't have any. So, all right. So we're gonna all the embellishments were done in the embroidery stage. All right. So we're just about done. Get across to here. Had just a little bit of fullness, so I'll just kind of work it in with my finger there. There we go. And then I'll just tie off, and then we're ready to put the binding on. I'm always so excited when I get to this point. We're almost done. All right, so there is our binding. Put the pins over here. I might need those again. So the binding is on. So now the next step is going to be to go over to the ironing board, and this is the trick with putting on binding with the sewing machine, you know, to stitch it down. You want to go over to the ironing board and you want to press this binding out from the back very crisply, so that, and make sure you get all the way up into the corners. This needs to be very crisp, and then you will have a nice seam when you get all done. So that's the trick with binding with the sewing machine, is to make sure you press out your binding. And normally, you know, we don't do that with the hand binding. So you want to press this out very crisply all the way around. So I'm going to go do that now, and then I will be back in a moment and we will start putting our binding on. Okay, so we're ready to put our binding on the front. I am going to leave my brown thread in my needle and my bobbin, and then we need to get those beautiful corners into the front also, because we've already got our beautiful corners on the back, but now we need them on the front. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take 8 little clover clips, the little binder clips, so like this, okay? And I'm going to put 1 on each side of each corner. And even when I do great big quilts, I only use 8. So I'm just going to bring my binding around to my stitch line, and you can see it pretty well on this because it's that darker brown. And I'm just going to put it 1 clip on each side of the corner. Okay, I'm just going to show you, and I've got the other ones done so I can show you. And then I'm going to bring this around also and put my little clip on, and then we need to make our beautiful corner. So what I'm going to do is grab my pin. I'm going to put a pin right here so I have it ready. I'm going to push my right side up with my thumb to the corner, and I'm going to make a beautiful 45-degree angle up here, okay? And then I'm going to push down and line the other side up with the other line that's going this way, and then I'm going to put a pin in that junction, and we have this beautiful 45-degree angle now on our corner. Okay, so that's what I do all the way around. So I put my 2 my little clips, clover clips on, and then I push up with my right thumb on the right side and push, and then make a 45-degree angle, bring it down and line it up there with the pin all the way around. So I do that on all 4 corners. So I have 4 pins and 8 binder clips, okay, on there. So I'm going to put my little clip holder over here so I can throw the clips in there if I need to. And now we're ready to do the zigzagging. So I've learned that it works better for me to zigzag the binding down than it does for me to use a straight stitch, because I can never get it to look nice on the back. So the straight stitching, I've just never really mastered that. So I use a zigzag. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a different stitch here, and I'll show you my stitch. I'm going to go back to my normal tab, number 1 tab here on my luminaire, and I'm going to use 1-10. And I save my binding width and length in this, so I always have it. And it's 2 millimeters wide, so it's very narrow, and then it's 1.4 millimeters long. So it's kind of medium, and it's quite narrow, okay? And I found that this was the size that worked the best for me. I got it so that I could match both sides. So what we're going to do is I'm going to bring my binding around to my seam line that we stitched it down with. I got a couple little threads in here that I got to get rid of. There we go. Okay, we're going to bring it right around to that, and the edge of the binding is going to be right on that line, like that. I'm going to put my foot, and I still have my J foot on because I like to still use that little notch in the center to help me to, and I don't want to start on a corner. You want to kind of start in the middle, okay? So you don't start in a corner. All right, so I am going to drop my needle, and so the right side of the zig is going to be on your binding. The left side zag is going to be just off the binding. So you're going to be going over the edge of your binding as you go. So I'm just going to tie this off right here, and then the left side is off the binding, the right side is on the binding, and I'm just slowly zigzagging. Now the trick is to either use monofilament or use very matchy thread. So then you don't really see the zigzag. It just looks like kind of a little, or what I want to say, kind of a little texture along the edge. So this was a very matchy thread, and this is that dark brown thread that I've been using. So this works really good. So I'm getting this all lined up with my stitching line here and holding it down with my fingers. It helps to kind of spread your fingers apart. And I'm just going to zigzag up towards my corner here. So we need to leave that pin in, because if we take the pin out, our beautiful corner may come out. So we don't want that. I'm going to leave that pin in there, and I'm going to zigzag right up into the corner. I'm kind of pulling back with my fingernail right here to hold that down flat when I get into that corner. All right, so we're going to zigzag up into the corner, and the trick is to be able to turn the corner and have that little notch on your foot right down the middle of the edge of the binding again. So let's see how I did. Well, let's see. I'm a little off. I'm a little in. So what I do is I put my foot down, raise my needle, just slightly adjust towards the edge of my binding again, so that notch is there, and then I'm going to drop my needle again. And you won't notice it on the back, because I have to adjust very often. So let's get this all lined up again, get our edge of our binding lined up with the stitch line. I've got this brown fabric was very ravelly. So I'm struggling. I've got ravels everywhere. And then we're going to stitch out of the corner. So the left hand zag is off the binding. The right hand zig is on the binding. All right, so we're going to line this all up. And I've gotten so I can do this at a pretty good clip now. And I've got my glasses on. It's a little hard to see probably because this binding and everything is kind of dark. But my thread is very matching. And like I said, if I don't have matching thread, I think in the last couple videos I've done, I've used monofilament, and that's the other option, is to use monofilament instead if you don't have matching thread. And the thread does need to match pretty close to do this, otherwise you see too much of the zigzag. But I've noticed if I use very matchy thread, you really don't see it much. All right, so I'm going to take this clip off, and we're going to get ready to go into this next corner here. Got to get all my binding lined up with my line there. And that's the line that we stitched it on with, so it's our stitching line. Okay, I'm going to pull this back a little bit, make sure I got it all lined up. And we're working into the corner. Okay, it's a little off here, so I have to get it lined up a little bit more. If I put my finger in that corner and pull back, then it keeps it nice and straight. All right, so we're going into the second corner. see if I can line this one up a little bit better. Okay. Put the needle down, turn around the corner, and I'm really off on this one, so we'll do the same thing. I'm going to drop my foot, raise my needle, and then I'm going to adjust over so that it's in the right spot. So my little notch is right on the edge of my binding. Drop my needle again, because I'm usually off. It's very rare that I actually get it the first time. So that's fine. And then we're going to start sewing out from the corner. All right, so this is how you do the binding. Take your time. Don't get in a hurry. It takes, you just have to take your time to do it. It looks usually quite nice when it's done. Just take your time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go around the rest of this, and then I will show you how I end it at the end, so you don't have to sit here and watch me do all this zigzagging, because it does take a little bit to get around even these smaller quilts. So I'm going to continue on, and then I will be back in a moment, and I'll show you how I'm going to end at where we started. Okay, so I'm down to the last corner here. I went into my corner, and believe it or not, I actually got this one right. I think I got this one lined up. So we're ready to come out of the last corner here. Get it right out of the corner there. I've got all my binding lined up here. Kind of hold it down. And then what I've done up here this is where we started, and I usually put a pin there because you don't want to overshoot your zigzagging too much, because you can see that then. So I try not to take more than a stitch or so, over where I started. So I always put a pin there so I can see what I'm doing. There was just a little bit of fullness in my binding, so I'm having to kind of work it in a little bit here. It's being a little cantankerous here. There we go. All right, so I don't want to go too much over my pin because it shows. So I'm going to go right up to my pin and take one stitch or so over, and then I'm going to cut off. And we made it around. Oh my gosh, this one's going to be so pretty. I really like fall colors, so isn't that pretty? So look at there, we got it all the way around. I'll take all my pins out, my corners, and get all my corners done here. I think I probably have a little thread that I need to cut right here at the end. There's usually a little thread where you start that needs to be trimmed off there. So there we go. All right, so now what I have to do is I'm going to take this over to the ironing board, and I am going to take the paper off the back of this. I always like to leave this until after I've stitched it down to make sure it doesn't pull. So I'm going to take this off right here, and I'm going to press it down on the back of my little quilt. And then I'm going to take a needle and thread and put a little stitch in each corner, because I found that this height bond doesn't like to grab a hold through this thickness here. So I usually just put it like from the seam to seam here, and then I put a little stitch, little hand stitch right here and right here, just to hold those corners down. So I'll do that in a moment, and then I will be back to show you what it looks like in the frame. So I'll be right back. Okay, so I've got my little mini quilt all finished and put it in the frame. It looks so cute in there. I really, I like the colors. I wasn't sure what I was going to think of the other colors that I put down here, but I really like it. So thank you so much for joining me for the September Kimberbell Mini Quilt. And this was part 4. So we're all done. And so next, I'll see you in about a month then for the October one. I was going to show you a picture. I think the October one is Halloween, if I remember right. I've got it here. Here it is. Yeah, so the October one is Halloween, so we're going to make this cute little Halloween quilt. So thank you so much for joining me. If you haven't subscribed to my channel, my YouTube channel, Sew Along with Jan, please do. I would love to see you come join our group. And then also I have a Facebook group called Sew Along with Jan, so come join us there as well. And if you enjoyed the video and if you learned something, give me a thumbs up on YouTube. It really helps me a lot. So thanks so much, everybody, and have a great day.